An early edition at 6 tonight. Nearly a dozen unified Progressive Party members, including a lawmaker, stand accused of plotting to overthrow the government. The ruling Saenuri Party is now taking aim at the main opposition party for helping that lawmaker win a parliamentary seat in general elections last year. Statistics Korea says the country's consumer prices are stabilizing, edging up just 1.3% in August compared to the same period last year. But the public would beg to differ. A poll indicates that most Koreans feel as though the rate was 4 times greater than the official figures. While many countries around the world are at loggerheads over whether to intervene in Syria or not, the Arab League calls on the UN and the international community to take necessary measures to stop the Syrian regime. They even vowed to present all forms of support to help the Syrian people defend themselves. We have these stories and more, so stay with us.
It is 11 a.m. in Pretoria, noon in Damascus, and 6 on a Monday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Kim Hyun-ji.
And I'm Daniel Chan. Thank you for joining us. We start with the maiden meeting for a new inter-Korean committee.
Right. Officials from the two Koreas have convened the first meeting of the committee that will manage the Kaesong Industrial Complex this Monday in North Korea's border town of Kaesong.
The priority is for the two sides to agree on an exact date for the resumption of operations at the joint industrial park, which came to a halt 5 months ago. While Pyongyang wants business to resume as soon as possible, Seoul wants to ensure that the two sides take the time to talk about how to make future operations more fruitful. Seoul and Pyongyang agreed to set up the new committee last month to prevent future shutdowns. We will bring you the outcome of the inter-Korean meetings as they become available.
The National Assembly has begun deliberation procedures over the arrest of lawmaker Lee Seok-gi, who's accused of plotting a conspiracy to topple the government.
A vote is expected as early as Tuesday on whether to give the green light. Our Yurian has the latest.
The probe into leftist lawmaker Lee Seok-gi on sedition charges has delivered yet another blow to the main opposition Democratic Party, still reeling from election defeats last year. The stunning news that the National Intelligence Service uncovered a plot by Lee to topple the government dashed the opposition's plan to regain a political initiative with its campaign to reform the spy agency. The Democratic Party has accused the spy agency of meddling in December's presidential election and hoped its street protests calling for its overhaul would allow it to regain popularity. But with all the public attention diverted to Lee's investigation, the opposition party faces an uphill battle in winning back support in the run-up to next month's by-election. Now, law enforcing authorities are seeking to arrest Lee, and the National Assembly is expected to vote this week on whether to approve the arrest. The ruling Saenuri Party, accusing the main opposition party of helping Lee to win a parliamentary seat in general elections last year, urges the opposition party to quickly approve Lee's arrest. In the general elections, the main opposition party and East Minority Unified Progressive Party cooperated by fielding a single candidate between them in many constituencies. Latest poll conducted by Korea Gallup showed that the opposition Democratic Party had an approval rating of only 20%, just half of that for the ruling party. The Democratic Party had also been bogged down with factional infights, with rival groups blaming each other for the last year's defeats in both the presidential and parliamentary elections. Yurian, Arirang News.
Korea's Transport Ministry will conduct an intensive inspection of the nation's railroad corporation that is expected to start as early as Tuesday and last for approximately 10 days. The probe comes after collisions involving 3 passenger trains in the southeastern city of Daegu on Saturday that were presumably caused by staff member carelessness. A 16-member team that includes officials from the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport will carry out a thorough checkup of the Korea Railroad Corporation's facilities and operations, as well as its staff. No one was seriously injured or killed in the incident on Saturday, but 2 Korail officials and the Daegu station chief were removed from their positions. Turning to some economic news now, consumer prices are showing signs of stabilizing, but there are growing concerns about the public's perception of the inflation rate. The inflation rate remained well below the central bank's target in August, but the rate felt by Koreans was 4 times greater than the official figures. Kim Min-ji has the details.
Chuseok, the Korean equivalent of Thanksgiving, is just around the corner and homemakers are busy shopping for groceries. But they are having a hard time choosing products to fit their budget due to soaring food prices. Official figures indicate the consumer prices are stabilizing, but the public seems to think differently.
Prices for the same types of fruits vary, and I'm not satisfied with the ones that I can afford.
Official figures indicate the consumer prices are stabilizing, but the public seems to think differently. Statistics Korea said Monday that the nation's consumer prices edged up just 1.3% in August compared to the same month last year. Consumer prices have been rising slowly over the past several months and have stayed in the 1% range for 10 straight months. This is well below the central bank's inflation target band of 2.5% to 3.5% this year. A recent survey conducted by Hyundai Research Institute, however, shows that the inflation rate felt by Koreans is 4 times greater than official figures. Consumers feel they have experienced a 5.4% rise in prices in the first half of this year from the same period a year earlier. Researchers attribute the discrepancy in the real and imagined figures to the price hikes of domestic agricultural products due to unfavorable weather conditions and an increase in the prices of daily necessities.
The financial burden of housing expenses, education, and food products needs to be reduced so households can make ends meet.
Experts say that the discrepancy in the real and imagined prices will likely widen due to an expected rise in housing rental prices and taxi fares in the second half of the year. The government last week predicted that consumer prices in Korea will increase 1.7% this year. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The Korean government has announced plans to inject around $7.2 billion this year to support 120,000 households that are trying to buy or rent new homes. The move is part of government measures unveiled last week to boost home transactions and lessen the burden of mostly low and middle-income households. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport says that people who are hoping to move into new homes will be able to secure loans with lower interest rates starting next Monday. A new type of transit card that can be used for nearly every mode of public transportation in most areas of Korea is set to be released this November. The Transport Ministry said on Monday that the new card will apply to railway trains, subways, and intra-city buses in more than 16 different municipal regions. That means cardholders will be able to visit almost any corner of the country with the swipe of a single prepaid card. The Transport Ministry said it plans to expand the services of the transit card by next year to include more areas, including Seoul and other transportation methods like intercity buses and public parking lots.
While the two Koreas have turned towards dialogue, the distance between Washington and Pyongyang couldn't be farther. North Korea rescinded its invitation at the 11th hour last week to a high-level U.S. official who was planning to ask for the release of detained U.S. citizen Kenneth Bae.
Most unexpected emissary of peace, we are talking about NBA star Dennis Rodman, who says he is ready to help and go to Pyongyang once more. Our Kim Ji-yeon has the latest.
Former NBA star Dennis Rodman says that he is planning to visit North Korea once again to secure the release of Kenneth Bae, who is currently being held captive in the reclusive state. Rodman's plan comes at a sensitive time after North Korea abruptly canceled a visit by a high-level U.S. official last week. North Korea cited Washington's use of strategic nuclear-capable bombers in a joint military exercise with South Korea as a reason behind its decision to pull the plug on a visit by Special Envoy for North Korean human rights issues, Robert King. The North Korean Foreign Ministry said it was furious the U.S. used B-52 bombers in the joint exercise that ended Friday, saying their participation nixed the environment for dialogue. King had been planning to travel to Pyongyang last Friday to negotiate the release of Kenneth Pae, a U.S. citizen of Korean descent jailed in North Korea. He was arrested last November while leading a travel group on a tour of North Korea and was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for hostile acts against the country. Experts here in Seoul say that Pyongyang's move was a calculated response to raise its bargaining power with the United States.
Pyongyang thought King's mission to rescue Pae will again make North Korea's human rights record appear in a bad light. The cancellation can be seen as a way of not opening a can of worms without receiving certain benefits.
It is thought North Korea initially expected to arrange a bilateral meeting with the U.S. during King's visit, but analysts believe Pyongyang changed its mind because it saw little chance that the U.S. would agree without the North taking significant action to give up its nuclear weapons programs. The 52-year-old U.S. basketball player Rodman surprised the international community early this year when he visited the reclusive state and met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Washington's Special Envoy for North Korean human rights issues, Robert King, was set to visit Pyongyang last Friday to win the release of a detained American citizen. But North Korea suddenly canceled King's visit at the last minute.
And Pyongyang cited Washington's use of strategic nuclear-capable bombers in a joint military exercise with South Korea as their reason. But analysts say it is likely that something else is going on to make the trip. For more, we are now joined by Dr. Kim Jae-ru, a researcher at the Korea Institute for Defense Analysis. Hello, welcome back, Dr. Kim.
Glad to be here.
So, North Korea watchers were speculating that this visit by Robert King to Pyongyang could trigger, the six-party talks to resume and maybe, help Washington and Pyongyang to sit down for talks. But that's all for naught now. Why do you think Pyongyang nixed King's visit?
It's very hard to, imagine the exact reason why they canceled those visits at the last minute. But Mr. Kenneth Pae's case is not the first case in terms of the detained Americans. This is at least since 2009, sixth time, which means my understanding is that the North Korea might have perceived this is not a high time to invite even Robert King, whatever King, to the Pyongyang, because even invitation, cancellation, and blaming, all these kind of their dialogue tactic. My understanding is not the total absolutely nixed, it's just a delaying. Because of the, actually the Kenneth Pae's issue is being pushed on the back burner in terms of Washington's understanding. Although Washington's State Department spokeswoman said that they were surprised and shocked, but it's rhetorical, diplomatic rhetoric. But Washington is relatively cool in dealing with North Korea. So Uda West visited on Monday to Pyongyang, and they all the strategic setting is trying to get back, into the six-party talks. But Washington is a little bit reluctant to move on. So overall, just Robert King's case is not just total cancellation. My understanding is a little bit different from the media coverage.
Right. Whatever Pyongyang does, the enigmatic North Korea, it just leads to one speculation or another from the rest of the world. And I'm going to add one more there, unfortunately. So what Pyongyang did, some people say it might be leading towards them trying to wield an upper hand in terms of future dialogue with Seoul and the rest of the world. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a reasonable, speculation and educated guess, because of for the last 5 times with the celebrity like Bill Clinton, former President Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter, and they got a lot of media coverage. Even Dennis Rodman's, case made a splash. So North Koreans are trying to use this kind of a newly setting, mood of reconciliation as, their own version of upper hand in dealing with the, nuclear issue. So I think the overall North Koreans are trying to get out of the diplomatic isolation. On top of that, they want to get the media attention plus the economic sanctions. Actually, it's hard to press the North Korea. They desperately need money. Money. Where comes the money? From the international communities and opinion, public opinion is very important. So I think the propagandistic maneuver of North Koreans is not a piece of cake. We have to keep an eye on their very delicate maneuvering. So timing is the issue at this point.
So you said that Washington, although they announced that this is very disappointing and kind of they were shocked, you say Washington is really kind of taking control of this, it's reacting very in a cool manner. But do we have any prospects for a U.S.-North Korea dialogue anytime soon now that this, King's trip to Pyongyang got canceled?
Because of as North Korea argued that, joint military drills to strategic bombers is over, right? Ultra Freedom Guardian is already over, and there is no, pretext to blame somebody else. So I think the Kaesong Industrial Complex and Mountain Kumgang Resort area and Family Union, all media splash will come up in the coming months. And using that as a bedrock, they are trying to invite, Beijing's power, and even they are trying to push to Washington. Probably Kenneth Bass's dire, desperate situation will be broadcasted to the American side. Overall, the North Koreans' maneuvering at this point is, like I said, getting out of the diplomatic isolation, easing the internationally imposed economic sanctions, and then getting back into the six-party talk setting, which will give Beijing justification for the chairmanship of the diplomatic leverage. So, although Kenneth Bass is not a high-profile case, this is a very strong case for the Pyongyang. So they don't want to use run out of all the cards they are using. So I think they are trying to push the Kenneth Bass case again on the table, negotiating table.
Right, like you mentioned, touched on a little bit before, Pyongyang has very limited sources of income, and I think we're holding on to a very large pipeline of that by having the power to say yes to Mount Kumgang and other inter-Korean related businesses. Do you think the Park administration, the South Korean side, should we carry on with the stick and carrot approach, or is this time for just continued talks and try to build on what we have at the moment?
I'm not in that type of guy, but I'm strongly admire Park Geun-hye's very step-by-step, very controlled approach in dealing with North Korea, because they know what their desperate need, and instead of mixing up all those cases, Park Geun-hye's strength is a principle, trust building, like a building blocks, one by one. His approach is very good. But they've done greatly with the Ultra Freedom Guardian exercise. Exercise is over, and next one is the reconciliation mood. It depends on the North Koreans' response. So sincerity and credibility, they must show to the Park Geun-hye government, and then Park Geun-hye government will give them a little bit of room to breathe. So I think that this time Park Geun-hye government's North Korean policy is very well organized. I admire that point.
So you're saying it's good right now, so let's keep it steady and keep it going at this speed.
Surely.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Kim, for joining us. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We look forward to having you back here again real soon.
Thank you.
While the UN awaits results of its investigation in Syria, Washington says it has found concrete evidence the Assad regime used the nerve gas sarin in last month's chemical weapons attack.
The revelation comes as the Obama administration is pressuring Congress to support the president's case for airstrikes on Syria. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Describing it as a very important new development, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry took to the airwaves Sunday to say there was proof sarin was used in last month's attack.
We have learned through samples that were provided to the United States and that have now been tested from first responders in East Damascus, and hair samples and blood samples have tested positive for signatures of sarin.
This is the first time the U.S. government has singled out the use of a specific chemical in the attack that killed over 1,400 people. Kerry's comments come after President Obama said he would seek congressional approval for airstrikes against Syria, a move that will hold up a strike for at least 9 days.
And I don't believe that my former colleagues in the United States Senate and the House will turn their backs on all of our interests, on the credibility of our country, on the norms with respect to the enforcement of the prohibition against the use of chemical weapons, which has been in place since 1925.
Backing from Congress won't be easy, with many Democrats and Republicans wary of war and uneasy about intervening in the Syrian conflict. Speaking to NBC Sunday, Republican Senator Rand Paul said he didn't see American interests on either side of the Syrian war, adding that the Senate might back Obama, but the vote was far from a slam dunk case in the House. Kerry did not mention if Obama would go ahead with the strike without Congress backing, but did say the president had the right to attack without his support. The House and the Senate are expected to vote on the week of September 9th. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
So Washington is trying to regain momentum for a strike against the forces of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. What are the responses from the Arab community? Son Jang-in reports.
In Cairo, the Arab League called on the United Nations and the international community to take the necessary measures to stop the Syrian regime. In their final resolution, which followed an emergency session held Sunday, the 22 Arab states promised to present all forms of support to help the Syrian people defend themselves. Prior to the meeting, Saudi Foreign Minister Saud al-Faisal said the condemnation of Syria was not enough and that Saudi Arabia would back a U.S. strike.
Our stance is that we support the will of the Syrian people. They know their best interests and know what is needed in regards to their internal situations. So whatever they accept, we accept, and whatever they refuse, we refuse.
Meanwhile, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad says his armed forces are ready to combat any foreign attacks. Syria's state-run news agency Sana quoted Assad as saying that his government can handle a U.S. strike and that Syria is capable of confronting any external aggression. Son Jang-in, Arirang News.
The month-long Istanbul Gyeongju World Cultural Expo, which kicked off over the weekend in Istanbul, is shedding light on the ancient Silk Road, a cross-continental trade route that linked the Far East and the West for thousands of years. Our cultural correspondent Park Ji-won tells us more.
Just in time for the Istanbul Gyeongju World Culture Expo, Korea's North Gyeongsang Province, the co-organizer of the event, dispatched 2 expedition teams to travel the ancient Silk Road. The team spent some 50 days on the road, covering about 17,000 kilometers from Korea's southeastern city of Gyeongju to Turkey's largest city, Istanbul. The first team traveled some 4,000 kilometers late March to early April from Gyeongju to the Chinese city of Xi'an, which is commonly known as the starting point of the Silk Route. The second group traveled another 14,000 kilometers by car mid-July to late August from China's Xi'an to Turkey's Istanbul, crossing through 7 countries, many of them being in Central Asia. Members from the team traced the footsteps of the Korean ancestors during their journey. Former Culture Minister and Korean history professor Choi Kwang-sik says Gyeongju was definitely a part of the ancient Silk Road. He says many burial items excavated from the tombs of Gyeongju, the ancient capital of Silla dynasty that existed from the 1st century BC to the 10th century, show that active trade was already being carried out on the Korean peninsula.
The Silk Road dates back to the 1st century BC, through which Chinese silks and many other items like papers and spices were traded between the East and the West. While the Silk Road basically refers to the ancient Chinese city of Xi'an and Rome of the Roman Empire, it stretches beyond Xi'an to other Far East cities such as Beijing, Gyeongju, or the Japanese city of Nara. Similarly, it also extends beyond Rome to Paris and Madrid.
Organizers of the World Culture Expo hope this special event in the Eurasian country will bring about another influx of exchange between Korea and Europe and act as the hub of the 21st century Silk Road. 박지원, Arirang News.
It's time for weather. We turn to our new weathercaster for the first time in early edition at 6. We have Michelle Park. Michelle, tell us more about the new weather conditions in Korea.
Well, our daytime temperatures are expected to be high through mid-September due to high pressure expanding from the North Pacific. We are also seeing a weak typhoon Toraji, which is in Okinawa, Japan, that may affect our country this weekend. Taking a closer look at the forecast, the daytime temperature in most parts of the region is still high. Seoul will start off the morning at 16 and reach 29 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the cities in the south should have clear sunny skies in the afternoon, while Busan is a little cooler at 27. Down onto Jeju Island, we'll have clear skies with lots of sunshine. Meanwhile, Dokdo and Mangkimgang tops out at 24. Well, that's it for today. I'm Michelle Park, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for that, Michelle. That's all from us. Thank you for watching.
And I'm Kim Yeon-ji. Stay tuned to Arirang for more news coming up.